There is a silence that follows the spoken word, when it is said in faith. It is not the silence of emptiness, but the stillness of creation, the hush before the morning breaks. You say it once, and if it was said from the deep well of knowing, then there is nothing more to do. You rest, not in laziness, but in divine certainty, the kind of rest that only comes when the seed has already been buried, and the gardener does not stay up watching the soil, but sleeps, knowing the bloom is inevitable. And yet this is where most turn back. This is where the mind screams for repetition, for effort, for striving. But there is a deeper way, a holier rhythm, and it begins with the sacred simplicity of saying it once. You do not plant a seed and return to unearth it each day, wondering if it remembered to grow. Nor do you speak into the vast field of imagination and then panic at the silence that follows. The silence is the sign, the absence of noise, of drama, of reaction, that is the holy confirmation. For when you say it once, from the inner altar of belief, from the temple of your own imagination, it is done. Not because you felt it tingle down your spine, not because the sky cracked open, but because you are the operant power, and what you decree with conviction is law. And yet this brings us to what most never realize. The power was never in the words, the power is in the state. To say it once is not about brevity, but embodiment. To speak from the end is to clothe yourself in its reality, as a man wraps a robe around himself after the bath. It is not performative, it is not hopeful, it is natural, the way one wakes from sleep and accepts the new day without question. There is no ceremony in believing the sun will rise, so it must be with your assumptions. Feel the subtle difference. To say it once and expect it in the morning is not to force yourself to believe. It is to dwell in the Sabbath of having received. It is the quiet, holy expectation of one who remembers, not one who begs, and that remembrance is the key. All true manifestation is memory. You are not creating, you are recalling. You are the dreamer awakening to what was always true. This is why the Master can speak once and walk on, because he knows, not with the mind, but with the heart, with the body, with the being. And in that knowing, the word becomes flesh. So shall my word be that goeth forth out of my mouth. It shall not return unto me void. You do not shout at the rain to fall. You smell it in the air. You feel it in your bones. And you carry the umbrella before the clouds break. That is faith. So you say it once, not as a trial, not as a test, but as a decree. You turn inward, not outward. You enter the silence, not the spectacle. You speak from the mountaintop of inner certainty, not the valley of outer longing. And once it is spoken from that place, you seal it with rest. This is the posture of the fulfilled. But there's a reason few ever experience this directly. Because it asks for the death of doubt, the relinquishment of the ego's need to make it happen. It asks you to walk through the garden before the fruit appears, to laugh with the child before the child is born. It is not merely imagination, it is incarnation. You must become the thing you once desired, and that becoming begins with the spoken word, whispered once into the stillness of God within. Notice what shifts in you as you hear this. There is a slowing down, a deepening, a sacred trust being remembered. You are not striving anymore. You are allowing. You are knowing. You are returning to the garden where the end was always guaranteed. You do not need to water the roots with worry. You nourish them with rest. And just as the night holds the morning before it breaks into form, so too does your silence hold the promise spoken into it. But what if the very need to say it again is the thing that undoes the miracle? What if repetition born of fear is not devotion, but doubt in disguise? What if you've been replanting the seed each time you tried to help it grow? Which brings us to the deeper mystery hidden in plain sight. For the moment you try to help it grow, you declare it not yet grown, and the moment you doubt the promise, you place yourself outside its fulfillment. You become the one who waits, instead of the one who remembers. But the law is merciful, for it will always mirror back what you are, not what you want, not what you plead for, but what you accept as true. And the mirror does not lie. The mirror only reflects. Most are unaware they are looking not into a mirror, but into memory, a divine memory, etched in the walls of imagination. To say it once, and expect it in the morning, is to gaze into that sacred mirror, and see only what already is. You do not ask the mirror to show you. You assume the reflection is already yours, and so it becomes. You speak your desire once, and in that moment, it is no longer a desire, it is a decision. the decision to become, the decision to remember, to merge with the end until it feels more real than the lack ever did. And this is the mystery hidden in every answered prayer, that it was not given to you from without, but awakened in you from within. You were not waiting on the world was waiting on you to remember who you are. The man who says it once and rests is not careless, he is consecrated. He understands the nature of the law. He knows that every assumption is a garment, and every garment, once worn in faith, shapes the form of life itself. You do not need to fix what appears broken. You only need to wear the unseen until it becomes the seen. This is why the inner conversation is sacred. It is the womb of creation. What you whisper to yourself in the privacy of being, the world will one day shout aloud in form. If you say within yourself, I am, and feel it as true, that is the command, that is the decree. No angels need be dispatched, no signs need appear, for the word has gone forth and shall not return void. But most do not trust the silence that follows. They mistake quiet for absence. They do not understand that the universe speaks in whispers, and fulfillment often arrives dressed in the mundane. The door does not swing open with fanfare. It simply appears unlocked. The answer slips in through ordinary days, because you are no longer resisting it. You are no longer outside of it. You have become it. So you say it once, and then you enter the Sabbath, the inner Sabbath, where all is done. You go about your day as one who already is. You do not touch the desire again. You do not dig up the seed. You do not return to the old name. For to return is to resurrect the former self, the self who did not yet have, the self who was still seeking. Feel what begins to rise in you as you consider this. A quiet power, a still certainty, a deepening trust in the process that has always worked, though often unnoticed, unclaimed. You are not asking the world to change. You are asking yourself to remember that it already has. The world in its silence is listening to your assumption, and it cannot help but conform. This is the unspoken scripture written across all things. Be still and know that I am God. Be still, not passive, but poised, not indifferent, but certain. The stillness that holds the storm in its palm, and does not flinch. The stillness that says, it is finished, though nothing seems to have moved. And when the morning comes, it comes not with trumpet, but with knowing, not with lightning, but with ease. You step into what you assumed, not by accident, but by alignment. It feels familiar, because it is. It feels natural, because you've already lived it in imagination. The morning does not surprise you. You expected it. You made a place for it. You broke the bread before it arrived. But what if the reason you haven't seen it yet is because you never truly let it rest? What if your very effort has been delaying the harvest? What if faith isn't loud, but silent, and your whisper once was all the universe ever needed to hear? And this prepares us for something most people never dare to ask. What if the whisper was enough, because you are enough? Not as one becoming, but as one who already is. For in the stillness of faith, you discover that creation was never a reaching out, it was always a returning in, a remembering, a quiet unveiling of what was written long before time took shape. And this remembering is sacred. It is not loud, it is not dramatic. It is gentle as breath, but certain as dawn. You do not beg the sun to rise. You align your life with its rhythm. You trust in what has always been true, even when the sky is dark. And in that darkness, you do not curse the unseen. You prepare your table. You set your intention as if the light has already arrived, because in consciousness, it has. You say it once, and that is your covenant. Not with the world outside, but with the truth within. The outer is only shadow. The inner is the substance. And when you speak from the end, when you feel from the finish, you have already fulfilled the law. You do not need to see it to believe it. You believe it, and so you see it. And this belief is not loud. It is not anxious. It is restful. It is quiet like a child falling into sleep. So many pray and plead, unaware that every word of desperation reinforces the absence. They speak to lack and call it faith. But true prayer, real prayer, is the assumption that what is longed for is already yours. And in that holy assumption, the outer must bend. It has no will of its own. It cannot contradict your inner world. It only mirrors it. You say it once, not because you're afraid to ask again, but because you know the law does not require repetition. It requires revelation. It asks only that you wear the state, inhabit it fully, and trust the silence. Trust the sacred delay between seed and bloom, between breath and blossom. The space between word and world is not absence. It is the holy womb of becoming. And the longer you live from the end, the more real it becomes, until what once felt like imagination now feels like memory, and what once felt distant now feels inevitable. You are not summoning it. You are remembering that it was always yours. The moment you became it in consciousness, it became you in form. This is not theory. This is law. And yet few ever allow it to be this simple. They cling to doing, to effort, to control. But the law does not yield to force. It yields to knowing. You do not coerce the mirror. You assume the pose, and the image follows. In the same way, life does not respond to your worry. It responds to your inner posture. Who are you being in the silence? What are you wearing in the unseen? To say it once is not to be passive. It is to be precise. It is to step into the exact frequency of fulfillment and stay there, not wavering, not questioning, simply abiding in the truth of what is already finished. It is done, you whisper, and you mean it, not because the evidence is visible, but because the truth is felt, and in that feeling, you have already crossed the veil. And when the morning comes, as it always does, you will not need to be told. You will recognize what you planted by the fragrance in the air. The moment will unfold like a memory long forgotten, suddenly remembered, and you will smile, not in surprise, but in recognition. You were never waiting for it. You were walking toward it the whole time. Now feel this in your body. The ease of having already become, the peace of no longer seeking, the soft joy of trusting what cannot be seen, but can always be felt. You are not here to force. You are here to align, to return, to speak once from the heart of your being, and then walk as if the promise is fulfilled. But what if the delay was never delay at all, only preparation for the unveiling of what you secretly dared to assume? What if your world has been reshaping itself in silence, waiting for you to stop asking, and start receiving? And start receiving, not as one who waits at the door, but as one who knows the house is already theirs. You are not standing outside your inheritance, hoping to be let in. You are the heir, the one who walks through unseen corridors with quiet familiarity. And this is the shift the world cannot teach. To no longer seek from separation, but to dwell from union. To receive, you must surrender the identity of the one who lacks, the one who waits, the one who watches the clock, and questions the silence. For that version of you cannot hold what is already given. You must become the one who has. And in that becoming, you remember that you always did. This is the secret behind saying it once. Not as a command to the world, but as a recognition of what has been true in the heavens all along. The spoken word is the shadow of the inner movement. The world is the echo of your self-conception. You need not repeat yourself to the mirror of reality. You need only remain consistent in your reflection. This is the art of living in the end. Not a fantasy, not denial, but devotion to what is spiritually real, even before it appears naturally. You do not convince. You commune. You begin to see how effort becomes unnecessary in the face of knowing. You stop asking, when will it happen, and begin feeling, of course it is. And in that subtle shift, the world bends. Doors open where there were none. People show up carrying pieces of your inner picture, unaware they are fulfilling a prophecy you whispered only once. To say it once, with full embodiment, is to impress upon the infinite the form of your desire, and then trust the machinery of heaven to bring it forth. You do not build the bridge. You simply walk it, step by invisible step. You need not know how. You only need to remain who. And if you remain faithful to the identity of fulfillment, all things will reorganize themselves around that set. It cannot be otherwise. The law of assumption is impartial, eternal and exact. It does not reward effort. It reflects identity. It does not grant wishes. It echoes being. Feel how different this is from the way the world trains you to believe. You were taught to strive, to earn, to prove. But Spirit asks only that you assume. And in that assumption, creation is complete. Not because it will be done, but because it already is. Before they call, I will answer. And while they are yet speaking, I will hear. There is no delay in truth, only delay in recognition. So you say it once, from the mountaintop of inner knowing, and you descend into life as though the vision were fulfilled. You fold laundry with the joy of one whose prayer has already ripened. You pour your tea not with longing, but with love, as if each motion is an act of gratitude for what is no longer coming, but already here. And you do it softly, gently, because force is not of God, but peace is. And then the world begins to move, slowly at first, like a tide turning beneath the moon. It may come through the smallest of changes, a sentence spoken in passing, an invitation you almost decline, a yes where there had always been no, and you realize, it is not arriving, it is revealing. The life you assumed is unfolding before your very eyes. Let this knowing take root. Let it rise in your chest like morning light. You are not powerless. You are not forgotten. You are not hoping. You are not hoping. You are remembering. The longer you hold the assumption, the more real it becomes, until you forget you ever lived without it, until it feels absurd to have once been the seeker, because you now see yourself as the source. And yet there is more to this becoming, more to the stillness, more to the sacred act of speaking once and walking in silence, because sometimes what you think you want is only the surface of what your soul truly knows is yours, because the surface is shaped by memory, by habit, by echoes of past need, but the soul speaks in silence and symbols. It does not cry for what is missing. It waits for what is true. And often when you say it once with the fullness of faith, what comes is not the form you imagined, but the essence you truly desired, the deeper gift, the one your old mind could not yet name. This is why you must release the picture and trust the feeling. The image may shift, but the feeling never lies. That inner knowing, the calm, sacred yes that rings without sound, is the compass of creation. If you chase appearances, you may catch shadows, but if you hold the state, the substance finds you. You do not shape the world by grasping, you shape it by dwelling. So when you say it once, you are not casting a spell, you are returning to self. You are standing again in the garden where it was already given. You are not asking for permission to receive, you are awakening to what was never withheld. And this awakening is not loud, it does not scream, it comes like dew on the morning grass, soft, quiet, inevitable. This is why the act of assuming must feel natural, not grand, not theatrical, but intimate, organic. It must feel like slipping into something that has always fit. You do not wear the state like a costume, you wear it like your own skin, and you walk in it, not for validation, but because it is who you are. You have nothing to prove to the world, because the world is only proving you. And if the picture shifts, do not panic. Do not grieve the falling away of what was never the point. The outer forms are scaffolding, designed only to draw you inward, deeper into your own essence. Sometimes the thing you asked for falls away, not because the law failed, but because something holier was making room to arrive, something your spirit whispered before your mind could hear it. This is why detachment is not indifference, it is reverence. It is the highest trust, the trust that says, whether it looks like this or something greater, I already have it. It is mine in essence, and the form will match as surely as the shadow matches the stance. You do not clutch the branch, you abide in the root, and when the outer world does begin to change, and it will, you will recognize the pattern. You will feel the echo of your inner decree in every new unfolding, and you will smile, not because you got what you wanted, but because you remembered who you are. The world is your mirror, not your master, and mirrors do not argue, they reflect. According to your faith be it unto you, not your works, not your effort, your faith, the deep quiet assumption you carry in the unseen. This is why the whisper is enough. This is why the moment you accept it, it begins. Because your world is not responding to your words, but to your being, and being cannot be faked. It can only be remembered. So you walk softly now, not timid, but tender. You speak less and assume more. You no longer try to get things. You allow yourself to be them. And this shift, this holy reversal, is the axis upon which all true transformation turns. You do not create the change by demanding it. You become the change by remembering that it was always you. Notice how light begins to rise in you, even now. The old effort falling away like a garment that no longer fits. The new posture emerging, quiet, sure, unshaken. You are not waiting anymore. You are dwelling. You are no longer reaching for proof. You are resting in presence. The promise is not coming. The promise has already arrived. But what if even the desire itself was not yours to begin with, but a seed planted by the divine, waiting for you to awaken to its fruit? Because if the seed was not born of your striving, then the harvest is not dependent on your struggle. What if the desire that rose in you like a whisper was not a request to the heavens, but a memory from them, a trace of what is already written in the book of your becoming? Not a wish, but a remembrance. You feel it, don't you? The desire that came not as longing, but as knowing, not as absence, but as invitation. It did not ache, it called. And when you answered, not with pleading, but with presence, the miracle began, quietly, invisibly, instantly. Not when the outer shifted, but when you did, for all movement begins within. So when you say it once, from that holy place of knowing, you are not initiating creation. You are responding to it. You are saying yes to what is already yours in spirit. You are accepting the inheritance, not earning it. And that acceptance is the activation. You need not chase what you are chosen to receive. The soul does not generate desire by accident. It does not tease you with what cannot be yours. It shows you only what belongs to you, and waits for your agreement. The moment you say yes with your state, with your feeling, with your posture, it is done. Not done in time, but done in truth. And time, like shadow, follows what is already finished in light. This is why urgency dissolves in real faith. You are no longer running after something outside you. You are tending to something already within. And the more you nurture that inner atmosphere, that holy ground of assumption, the more naturally the outer blooms. You do not force a flower to open. You create the environment, and trust that the unfolding is its nature. And if it tarries, you do not doubt. You deepen. You go further into the inner temple, where form is unnecessary, and feeling is all. You hold the sensation of already being. You let it soften you, shape you, stretch you until you cannot remember what it felt like to be without. This is not pretending. This is being. And being is not loud. It is still. It is rooted. It does not need to be convinced or validated. It knows that what it holds in silence, the world must echo in form. For consciousness is the only reality, not the appearances, not the timeline, not the noise, but the quiet, inner reality that asks nothing from the world and yet shapes it entirely. And so the desire becomes less about what you think you need and more about who you truly are. It is not about receiving a thing. It is about becoming the one for whom that thing is natural. You do not attract by wanting. You attract by being. You assume the identity, and the world rearranges itself in response. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. Not because you pleased a distant God, but because your delight revealed what was already true. Your joy, your ease, your surrender. These are the signs that you are no longer outside of your own answered prayer. So feel the desire again, now, but do not cling to it. Let it rise like incense. Let it rest in the air. Do not trap it in images. Let it breathe in feeling. Let it become the mood you live inside, the scent you wear, the energy that walks before you. You are not asking for the desire to come true. You are remembering that it already is. And as you rest in this remembrance, notice how everything softens, how the edges blur, how the waiting ends. There is no rush. There is only resonance. And that resonance is magnetic. It draws to you not by pulling, but by being, not by reaching, but by resting in truth. But what if the desire was not just about you at all? What if it was the way the divine moves through you, to reveal more of itself? What if your fulfillment is not the end, but the beginning of something far greater waking up within you? Because if fulfillment is the beginning, then every desire is a doorway, not to possession, but to revelation, not to having, but to being. What you thought was simply a wish was, in truth, an invitation from the divine within, calling you into a higher remembrance of yourself. It comes clothed as longing, but it leads to awakening. You are not here to collect things. You are here to remember who you are through the things that arise in your heart. Each desire, when honored rightly, leads not to the object, but to the self that already possesses it. The form appears, yes, but it is the identity beneath it that is the true gift, that is the holy unveiling. So you say it once, not to the sky, but to the deep, the holy of holies within your own consciousness. And when you speak as one who has heard the call and answered it with embodiment. You wear the state, not to get something, but because it is already yours, because your true self has already said yes. This is why no outer sign is needed. The sign is the shift, the inner tone that has changed, the feeling of arrival, even in the silence. The world does not give you things. It shows you what you have accepted. It reflects the temperature of your inner being, and when you rise into the frequency of your fulfilled desire, the mirror must comply. It cannot do otherwise. This is not reward, it is reflection. And so you stop asking for signs and start living from the sign within. You stop checking the outer world for confirmation, and you turn inward, where the garden already grows. You tend to the invisible. You walk as one who has, even before anything has appeared. And in walking, the way opens. This is what is meant by living in the end. It is not acting. It is not pretending. It is not pretending. It is becoming. You do not play the part, you let the part play you. The version of you who already is, already loved, already wealthy, already whole, that version is not fictional, it is eternal, it is waiting for you to step into it, and stay. And when you stay, long enough, gently enough, something begins to change in the fabric of your life. Things soften. Doors that were closed seem to forget they ever were. People begin to mirror your new state, without knowing why. You are not doing more, you are being more, and that being draws all things unto itself. Seek ye first the kingdom of God, and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. The kingdom is not in time or space, it is within you. The righteousness is alignment, to live from your highest knowing, not from fear or lack or delay. And when you do, the things you once chased begin to arrive without strain, because they are responding to your truth, not your need. Feel what it means to live like this, to walk in the world as if nothing is missing, not because you are forcing belief, but because you no longer identify with the one who lacks. You have crossed the threshold. You are no longer asking for your desire to come. You are asking how to live from the place where it already has. And that question, how to dwell in the fulfilled state, that is the only true spiritual practice. All else is noise, all else is preparation. But when you find that inner place, and live from it, moment by sacred moment, the illusion of separation dissolves. You are no longer trying to bring heaven to earth. You are realizing it has always been here, and yet there is still something even deeper. For when you truly embody the state, when you no longer reach outside yourself for anything, a second miracle occurs. The desire transforms, it expands, it reveals itself not as a goal, but as a messenger. It came not only to bless you, it came to birth something through you, something larger, something eternal. And what if the very act of assuming your desire was also preparing you to carry a greater vision for others? What if your fulfillment is not only yours, but the seed of someone else's awakening? Because nothing you assume in love is ever just for you. Consciousness is not isolated, it is one. And every time you rise into a higher state, not just momentarily, but by becoming it, you carve a path in the unseen for others to follow, without effort, without teaching, simply by being. Your assumption becomes a light, a pattern, a rhythm in the fabric of reality. What you embody in silence becomes possibility in the collective. Your fulfillment becomes a testimony, not of striving, but of surrender, not of willpower, but of remembrance. And this is the deeper purpose of desire, not to receive something, but to reveal something divine through your own becoming. And so when you say it once, and expect it in the morning, you are not only choosing your end, you are expanding the field of what can be known. You are walking ahead, lighting candles in the invisible corridors of consciousness. Others feel your faith, though they may never hear your name. They sense the ease you dwell in, and something in them begins to relax. This is how the kingdom spreads, not by force, but by frequency. The frequency of knowing, the calm certainty of one who has returned to the garden and found it still intact. You do not need to convince, you need only abide. And as you abide, you become the living proof of what is possible through assumption. But assumption must be pure, not a means to an end, but the end itself. You cannot wear the state for effect. You must wear it because it is you, because anything less feels false. And the world, your world, responds not to what you say, but to what you cannot help but be. You rest in the state, like one who has remembered their true name, not hurried, not anxious. You are no longer seeking alignment. You are the alignment. And in that posture, things unfold not because you chased them, but because you stopped running. You let the good that was always yours catch up to you. It was never far. You were just moving too fast to feel it. And now, here in the stillness, you feel it again. That old familiar warmth, that quiet knowing. You are not creating anything. You are consenting to its truth. You are yielding to the inevitability of the word once spoken in faith. That word is alive. It does not return void. It fulfills its purpose because it is one with the purpose. And if the outer appears unchanged, you do not flinch. You know what has shifted. You feel what has been set in motion. You trust the law, not as a mechanism, but as a mirror of the divine nature, a nature that does not withhold, a nature that gives all of itself when you give all of yourself to being. This is the sacred contract, your identity for the promise, your assumption for the reality. The world is not punishing you. It is simply waiting for you to move into the self that matches what you asked for. Not someday, Now, always now. Let this understanding settle into your breath. There is nothing to fix, nothing to manifest, nothing to force into place. There is only one question: who are you being? And that question answers all others. You are not trying to get to the end. You are beginning from it. And from that beginning, the story unfolds exactly as you assumed it would. Before Abraham was I am. The name of God is not a future tense. It is presence. Now, always now. And so you speak the word once, not to start a process, but to align with what already is. You do not water it with worry. You do not revisit it with fear. You carry it as complete. And in your quiet conviction, the world must echo your decision. But what if the true miracle was not in receiving what you desired, but in discovering that you had become someone who no longer needed it to feel whole? Because to feel whole, before the world changes, is to wield the true power of God within. You are no longer seeking completion through things. You are radiating completion, and things align to reflect it. The desire becomes not something to reach for, but a reflection of what is already realized. It is not the arrival that makes you feel it. It is the feeling that makes it arrive. This is the holy reversal the mind struggles to accept. It wants to see before it believes. But the law works from the unseen. You believe, and so you see. And when you say it once with conviction, when you drop the seed of identity into the soil of silence, you are not placing an order to the universe. You are placing yourself in harmony with what is already finished. Wholeness does not require proof. It requires remembrance. And as you dwell in the end, you discover that what you truly desired was never the thing, but the state it represented. You asked for the relationship, but what your soul sought was union. You asked for the wealth, but it was freedom you longed to remember. You asked for healing, but wholeness was already there, waiting to be assumed. And the great paradox is this: the moment you no longer need it to feel it, it becomes yours. Because now, you are the vibration of it. You are the embodiment. And what you embody, you inevitably express. This is why the fulfilled state cannot be faked. The law does not respond to effort. It responds to identity. You do not try to feel wealthy while believing in lack. You shift into wealth by assuming you already are. You wear it quietly. You feel the safety of it, the ease, the quiet gratitude. And in that assumption, the world must align. You say it once, and it is done. Not because the outer changed, but because you did. Because you no longer identify with the one who needs. You have become the one who knows. And this knowing is gentle. It is not boastful or loud. It does not beg or explain. It rests like a king in his kingdom, like a child in her mother's arms. And from that rest the world rearranges, subtly, shamelessly. You begin to forget the old self, the one who chased, the one who waited. You no longer pray for a different life. You wake to the truth that it is already yours, not because of what you've done, but because of who you have dared to be. Thou preparest a table before me, in the presence of mine enemies. The table is not built in fear, it is built in faith. You sit before the evidence of contradiction, and you feast. You do not flinch. You do not wait for circumstances to change their tone. You declare their power over you is gone, not with defiance, but with indifference, because you are already where you chose to be, and what once felt like waiting now feels like unfolding. You are not outside time, but you are no longer bound by it. You see it for what it is, a mirror stretching between the now and the seen, and what bridges them both is the assumption that never wavers. So you do not ask again. You do not water the seed with fear. You let it rest in you, like a song remembered in silence. The moment you try to need it again, you forget it's already done. The moment you try to prove it, you become the one without it. But if you rest deeply, it comes, not because you chased it, because you let go. And from that letting go, you discover a richer joy, the kind that does not depend on what arrives, the kind that blooms simply from being in harmony with yourself. You are not waiting to celebrate, you are the celebration. And that vibration makes the invisible visible, in ways you could never script. But what if that joy, the kind that needs nothing, is the actual key to everything? What if your only task was to remember how it feels to be whole, and let the world follow suit? Because if the key is joy, then joy must come first, not as a result, but as a cause. The world tells you to rejoice after the change, but spirit whispers, rejoice now, and the change will follow. For when you find your wholeness before the appearance, you have already become the cause of the appearance. The world becomes your echo, not your authority. And this joy is not loud, it is not manic or desperate. It is quiet, steady, like sunlight warming stone. It doesn't demand attention, it radiates truth. It is the natural rhythm of one who has nothing to prove, one who no longer waits to be chosen, one who remembers they have always been. To say it once and expect it in the morning is to live in this joy. Not the joy of arrival, but the joy of alignment. The moment the state becomes natural, the thing is inevitable. But it is never the thing that gives you peace. It is the peace that gives you the thing. So rest into that now. Let yourself feel it not as a possibility, but as a memory. The kind of memory that lives in your bones, before your eyes. You don't have to force it. Just stop opposing it. Let the truth that you are already whole rise up through the stillness. Not because of what you have, but because of who you are. Wholeness is your inheritance. Not a reward for faith, but the substance of it. And faith, real faith, is the ability to feel now what the world says is later. To walk as though already received, to dwell as though already known. You do not look for signs when you are home. You rest in the familiarity of the furniture, the warmth of the walls, the echo of your own voice within it. And what if you've been home the entire time, only dreaming of distance? What if the journey was never outward, but inward, a return to the end you thought you had to earn? But in truth, the moment you assumed it was yours, you stepped through the veil, not into something new, but into something remembered. This is why you do not need to repeat yourself to the divine. Your assumption is the prayer. Your state is the amen. It is not the frequency of your voice that calls things into being. It is the frequency of your being. You are not trying to attract. You are allowing the world to reflect your new posture. You say it once, and then you live like it was always true. That is the secret most never dare to try, because it requires the death of doubt, the release of effort, the surrender of control. But this surrender is not weakness, it is the deepest power. To let go is to return. To trust what you've already declared is to honor the law, and that trust becomes the soil in which joy takes root. A joy not dependent on evidence, but rooted in identity. The joy of one who knows that creation is finished, and the unfolding is certain. You are no longer waiting for the world to say yes. You are walking as the yes, living as the yes, breathing as the yes, breathing as the yes. This is the power of saying it once. You are not casting a fragile hope into the wind. You are issuing a decree from the throne of your inner being, and you do not need to speak it again, because the word once spoken in truth continues its work without effort. You move on, not because you forget it, but because you have become it. Let this realization settle into you now. You are not practicing to become. You are remembering what you already are. You are not planting new seeds every day. You are letting the one you planted unfold in its perfect time, not by your hand, not by your worry, but by the nature of the law. And if the joy rises before the evidence does, do not silence it. That is the sign, that is the proof, that is the inner assurance that you've crossed into the promised land, not with your feet, but with your feeling. And what you feel now, consistently, will soon be called real by the world. But what if the greatest mastery is not in holding the vision, but in holding the state, even when no vision remains? What if your persistence in identity is the only thing the mirror ever needed to respond? Because the mirror does not respond to what you look at, but to who you are when you look. And this is the secret that dissolves every fear, every delay. Your world reflects not the strength of your vision, but the depth of your identity. Not what you want to see, but what you have dared to become. And so you find the courage to remain in the state, even when form wavers, even when evidence disappears, even when your old self cries out for signs. You stay not because you are stubborn, but because you are faithful, not to the desire, but to the knowing, to the truth that once spoken in stillness, once accepted in imagination, it must become flesh. This is the holy act, to hold the state even when the outer picture dissolves, to say it once and rest, not in hope, but in the full embodiment of I am, not because the scene is clear, but because the feeling is real, not because you know how it will arrive, but because you know who you are now, and who you are determines what must come. You are not rehearsing a future, you are remembering a fact, and in that remembrance, the outer bends, slowly at first, like shadows lengthening toward dusk, then suddenly, like light breaking through the veil. Not because you forced it, because you stopped contradicting it, because you stopped checking the soil for signs, because you let the seed grow in peace, and that peace becomes your evidence. The stillness that settles over you like soft rain, the quiet confidence that no longer asks when or how. This is the signature of alignment. You no longer perform for manifestation, you breathe it. You no longer seek reassurance, you are the reassurance. You no longer ask for a door to open. You realize the walls were never real. You are not waiting to be chosen by your desire. You have already chosen it. And in that choosing, you have claimed the identity that matches its fulfillment. This is why saying it once is enough, not because repetition is wrong, but because clarity is powerful. And when the word is spoken from clarity, from inner certainty, it needs no echo. The mind will want to revisit it. The body may crave repetition for comfort, but the spirit knows. And when you trust that knowing, the world yields, not to your effort, but to your embodiment. The law answers to feeling, not frequency of speech. And the deepest feeling is not loud, it is lived. Let the weak say, I am strong, not as a technique, but as a revelation. The act of saying I am is not a performance, it is an unveiling. You are not convincing yourself. You are allowing what is already true to rise into awareness, and that allowance is the channel through which the unseen becomes seen. So rest now, deeply, in the being of it, not the idea, not the image, but the identity, the texture of already fulfilled, the rhythm of wholeness, the fragrance of completion. Let it settle into your breath, your movements, your choices. Let it become so natural that you forget there was ever another way. This is how change comes. Not through force, but through fidelity. Not to the thing, but to the self who already has it. You do not need to remind the universe. You only need to remember yourself. You do not need to push life into place. You need only hold your place in the vision that was never outside you. And when you do, something holy unfolds, not just around you, but within. A silence that hums with truth, a stillness that vibrates with power, a freedom that no longer needs the world's permission to feel joy, because you are no longer the seeker, you are the place it was always seeking. But what if the entire journey was never about what you manifest, but about who you are willing to be, when there is nothing left to chase? What if this stillness is the treasure hidden in the field, and you've already found it? Because if the treasure is the stillness, then stillness must be the beginning of all things. Not the pause before the work, but the work itself. Not the emptiness between desires, but the fullness beneath them. That sacred stillness, the one you feel now beneath the surface of your breath, is the place where the word is planted and where the word becomes flesh. And in that stillness something begins to shift, not around you, but as you. The more you dwell in it, the more clearly you hear what was always there. The voice not of longing, but of truth. The voice that says quietly and without fanfare, all that is mine is thine. The voice that does not speak in promises, but in presence. You do not need to beg the stillness to speak. You only need to become silent enough to hear what has never stopped speaking. And that voice is not in words, it is in being. It is the hum of alignment, the vibration of the I am recognizing itself again. It is the soundless sound of your return. To live from this stillness is to carry the end with you. Wherever you go, whatever you do, you don't have to summon the feeling anymore. It moves with you, like breath, like heartbeat, like light. You no longer visit the state, you live in it. You no longer touch the vision occasionally, you are the vision clothed in form. This is the secret behind the command to say it once. When you say it from the stillness, from the resting ground of the fulfilled self, it is not a sentence, it is a shift. And the law only responds to shifts, not to wishes, not to willpower, but to the quiet, complete becoming that says it is already so. You have become the fertile ground. You are the soil where the seed remembers it is already a tree. And in that remembrance, there is no struggle, there is only unfolding. What you once chased now recognizes you. What you once doubted now bows to your presence. And not because you did anything to earn it, but because you finally stopped denying that it was already yours. This is not arrogance, it is devotion. The highest reverence is to see yourself as God sees you, whole, complete, lacking nothing. That vision is not pride, it is prayer. And when you pray in that way, not by asking but by being, the world cannot help but respond. For thine is the kingdom, and the power and the glory, not someday, not when things improve. Now, the kingdom is your state of consciousness, the power is your assumption, the glory is the world echo is answered, not in time, in timelessness. Because God doesn't operate on delay, God operates on alignment, and God, as Neville so beautifully revealed, is your own wonderful human imagination. That is where all things begin, and that is where all things are born again. So do not wait, do not beg, do not plead. Instead, imagine, feel, rest in the sweet security that what you feel is forming now. Let it become familiar, let it become normal, until you no longer hope, you know. And in that knowing, you relax, you stop searching, you stop questioning, because you've already received, and though your eyes have yet to see it, your soul already celebrates it. This is the peace that passes understanding. This is the secret hidden in plain sight. This is the power woven into your very being. You do not need to earn it. You only need to feel it into existence. And so now, in the stillness of this moment, let go of everything else. Let go of the how. Let go of the when. Let go of the waiting. And simply allow the feeling to bloom within you, like a quiet sunrise. Not because the world has changed, but because you have. And when you change, the world must follow. As within, so without. As above, so below. And the feeling is the bridge. The feeling is the key. The feeling is the secret. And you, beloved dreamer, hold that secret now. The world you see is but a mirror held up to your inner feeling. It reflects back the convictions you carry, not the words you speak, nor the effort you push forth. And so, if you wish to reshape the outer, you must return not to action, but to emotion. It is the unseen current beneath the surface that moves the great ships of destiny. We are not commanded to pretend. We are called to feel, even in the absence of evidence, what it would be like if it were already so. This is faith, not blind belief, but full embodiment. And Scripture whispers the same wisdom. What things soever ye desire when ye pray, believe that ye receive them and ye shall have them. Mark 11:24. It does not say beg and you shall receive, nor does it say struggle, and it will be yours. It says believe you have received it. That is a state of mind, a shift of being, a gentle rearrangement of your inner climate from yearning to fulfillment. And once you dwell there quietly, consistently, the outer must respond, because the feeling of the wish fulfilled is the command that creation cannot ignore. When you walk through your day with a soft knowing, not loud, not boastful, but steady, as one who has already arrived, life rearranges itself around that signal. People move, opportunities appear, paths open, delays dissolve, and none of it was forced, because you moved first, in imagination, and the outer, being servant to the inner, followed without resistance. You did not chase, you aligned, and in alignment there is no need for force, only flow. So allow yourself now to sink deeper into the knowing that what you desire has already found its home in you. You are not a beggar of reality, you are its author, and feeling is your pen. Each time you return to the sensation of it being done, of it being yours, you write that truth more deeply into the fabric of the unseen, and soon the scene will catch up. But you will no longer be surprised, because you've already felt it, again and again and again. You have lived it in your inner sanctuary so many times that when it arrives you'll smile, not in disbelief, but in recognition. You'll say, of course, this is the echo of what I have been. And so the work is gentle, the practice simple. It is the daily cultivation of one quiet feeling. It is done, not because the outer says so, but because you say so. And in time the world will bow to the feeling you refuse to let go of. So breathe now, let your shoulders drop, let your heart soften, let your spirit rest, and feel, for just a moment, the warmth of your wish fulfilled. Not tomorrow, not soon, now dwell there, bask in it, let it wrap around you like a familiar melody, a song your soul has always known, because it is not coming, it is already here, and you, by the power of your divine imagination, have become one with it. That is the secret, that is the law, that is the beginning of all creation. The world of form is but the shadow of the world of feeling, and though we are taught to chase form, to struggle for it, to wait upon its permission, the truth lies deeper, beneath thought, beneath word, in the quiet hum of the feeling within. For feeling is not a reaction, it is the cause. It is not what you have after something occurs. It is what must be present before the world knows how to respond. You are not waiting for life to show you joy. You are called to feel joy, so life can reflect it. This is why Neville said feeling is the secret, because what you feel you fertilize, and what you persist in feeling you give birth to.
There is no outer resistance, only inner contradiction. And when feeling aligns, there is no delay. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. Psalm 37:4. But what is the Lord if not the I am within? To delight in the Lord is to rejoice in your own identity as the one who already has. To find your pleasure not in the evidence, but in the assumption. To feel the sweetness of the thing fulfilled, not in the outer event, but in the inner experience. It is a dance of vibration, not a checklist of deeds. And the more you rest in the delight, the less you grasp, the less you chase, the faster it comes. The secret, always, is the feeling of the end, not the hope, not the longing, but the stillness of yes, the settled already. For creation is finished. You are not building the house of your desires. You are moving into it. With each breath you arrange your inner furniture. You sit on the couch of your wish. You run your hands along the walls of fulfillment. You smell the air of your already chosen life. That is how the unseen becomes seen. Not with sweat, but with surrender. Not with effort, but with embodiment. And embodiment begins in the feeling. Not the fleeting mood of the moment, but the gentle chosen atmosphere you keep returning to. The atmosphere of, it's already done. And so when doubt whispers in your ear, you smile softly, not to fight it, but because you know something it does not. You know the law. You know the source. You know that the outer must yield to the feeling sustained. Even if it lingers for a while, even if the outer echoes the old state, you stay faithful to the vibration you've chosen, and the unseen begins its work. People rearrange, emails arrive, doors open, but more than that, you change. You begin to glow with the inner certainty of one who is no longer reaching, no longer asking, no longer waiting. You are dwelling, you are resting, you are assuming, and that assumption is the prayer fulfilled. No pleading, no repetition, just quiet agreement with what already is. That is the truth that reshapes timelines. That is the energy that collapses delay. It is not speed that brings the manifestation. It is alignment. And alignment is nothing more than the consistent return to a single sacred feeling. It's done. Let that feeling grow roots. Let it breathe through you. Let it settle in the belly, as a knowing that does not need proof, because it is the proof. And as you lie down tonight, as you close your eyes and slow your breath, let that feeling cradle you like warm light. This is your home now. This is your truth. This is your seed. And the world, though it may not know it yet, is already changing in your favor, because feeling is the secret. And so the silence becomes sacred, for it is in silence that feeling rises, unfiltered by noise, untouched by the senses, free to reveal what you truly hold as real, not what you say you believe, but what you feel as true. That is the seed from which your world grows. You do not need to force yourself into some unnatural ecstasy. You only need to settle into the mood of fulfillment, the gentle inner atmosphere that says, I am wealthy, I am loved, I am whole, I am free, not as a chant to convince, but as a tone to dwell in, as real to you as breath, as present as the heartbeat you never question. The imagination, when fused with feeling, is not fiction, it is creation. This is the divine formula hidden in plain sight, spoken not in commandments, but in stories and parables, waiting to be felt rather than just read. Jesus said, according to your faith be it unto you. Matthew 9:29. And faith, Neville taught, is nothing more than feeling, a deep inner knowing, clothed in emotion. To feel a thing deeply is to believe it, whether you're aware of it or not. This is why feelings are sacred. They are the whispers of your creative power. The feeling of doubt, it creates delay. The feeling of lack, it brings more to fill the void. But the feeling of joy, unexplained, unprovoked, joy for the sake of joy, is the sound of heaven moving. It is the soul remembering its truth. And in those quiet moments, when you let go of how and rest only in yes, you become magnetic, not by willpower but by softness, not by control but by surrender. You begin to notice the subtle ways life bends toward your new reality. People speak to you differently. Opportunities seem to bloom from nowhere. Even your own posture changes. You walk not as one who waits, but as one who has. This is not a performance. It is not a role you're trying to play. It is the realest version of you, the one who no longer seeks permission from the world, but gives it instead, because feeling precedes fact, and the law must reflect the seed. So rather than argue with the mirror, change the expression. Rather than chase the image, become the essence. And how do you become? By feeling, consistently, lovingly, deliberately. You pick up the garment of your wish and wear it in the invisible places. You speak not of wanting, but of having, not out loud, not for others, but for yourself, in the stillness of the heart, where the real work is done. You are not waiting for the world to show you signs. The sign is your inner peace. The signal is your gratitude for things not yet seen, because in truth, they are seen, just not yet with eyes. They live within you, and they are being nourished by every feeling you allow. Every night you fall asleep in the state of the wish fulfilled. You are watering the roots of your reality. You are shaping time itself. You are collapsing the gap between desire and experience. This is the mystery. And yet there is no mystery at all. Only practice, only trust. Feel as though you already are, and you will be. Feel as though it is already done, and it is. No ceremony, no struggle, just the sacred ease of resting in the truth that the world is not separate from you, it is within you. You do not force it, you do not beg it, you feel it, and the rest takes care of itself. There is a holy stillness that follows when you feel something realer than the facts around you. Not louder, just deeper. Not brighter, just closer. It wraps itself around you like quiet assurance, like the hush of a prayer already answered. And in that sacred hush, you no longer search for signs. You become the sign. You are no longer waiting for the door to open. You're already inside the room. For when you feel the wish fulfilled, your world begins to obey in whispers before it ever shouts. This is the secret not shouted from rooftops, but spoken within the temple of your being, the temple not made with hands. And whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. Mark 11:24, notice the tense. Have received. Not someday, not eventually. Now. You receive with feeling. You become the answered prayer by the mood you carry. You tune yourself to the reality you wish to dwell in, and then you dwell there. Not for a moment, but for a lifetime, or an hour, or even just a night of sleep. That's all it takes sometimes. A single night spent feeling it is done can shift the trajectory of your world, and no one outside you has to know. It's your inner secret, your sacred act, your silent agreement with God, who is your own imagination. This is why emotion is holy, not the scattered bursts that come and go, but the felt sense that stays, the subtle hum beneath the noise, the quiet conviction that holds no tension, only presence. That's where you plant your seed. You don't dig it up to check if it's growing. You don't plead with the soil. You water it with feeling, the feeling of already, the inner climate of yes, the invisible confidence that whispers, it's already mine. And when the winds of doubt return as they do, you don't fight them. You simply return to the garden. You feel again. You go back into that state, the end scene of your inner play, and you rest there. You don't strain. You don't perform. You allow. And the more you allow yourself to feel, the more you surrender to the outcome being settled. Not someday, but now. The faster time begins to bend, because time too is an illusion of feeling. When you wait with anxiety, it stretches. When you wait with fulfillment, it collapses. The event doesn't come to you, it emerges from you. You are the source, not the seeker. You are the cause, not the effect. And so the real question isn't when will it happen, but rather, can I feel it now? Can I feel love before it arrives? Can I feel wealth before the money comes? Can I feel peace before the storm ends? Because when you do, you don't just attract that state, you generate it. You become it. And then the world has no choice but to match the tone you've set. Life responds to your vibration, not your words, to your embodiment, not your effort. This is the gentle power of feeling, and it is always within reach. Not in hours of discipline, but in a moment of surrender. A quiet breath, a softened body, a still heart resting in the mood of the fulfilled desire. And if it slips away, you return again, lovingly, playfully, without shame. For each return strengthens the root. Each rehearsal writes it deeper into your soul, until it becomes your nature. Not something you do, but something you are. And then, what once felt far becomes familiar. What once felt difficult becomes effortless. What once felt like magic becomes your new normal. And that, beloved, is how feeling shapes reality. Not by force, but by frequency. Not through control, but through communion. You feel it, and it becomes. There's a language spoken before words, a language not of the lips, but of the heart. It doesn't argue. It doesn't explain. It simply knows. And this knowing has a fragrance. It lingers in your breath, colors your gaze, softens your pace. You feel it before you see it. You become it before the world reflects it. This is the true alchemy, to dwell not in the facts, but in the feeling of what is becoming. A gentle turning inward, where you clothe yourself in unseen realities, not with strain, but with ease. Not to force change, but to yield to it. There is a sacred rest found in the feeling of the fulfilled wish, not excitement, not striving, but a holy calm, like standing in a house you have already built, like walking barefoot through a garden you once imagined. You don't need proof. You are the proof. For we walk by faith, not by sight. 2 Corinthians 5:7. Faith is not blind. It sees with a deeper eye, the inner eye of imagination, guided by the feel.
It does not ask for permission to rise. It simply is asterisk. And so it touches all things. You walk in that light now, not as one who tries to believe, but as one who has become belief itself, the belief that never needed proof, because it knew itself as the root. You feel no need to convince the world. You let the world speak in its own time, but within you, the truth is loud, the fulfillment is steady, and this steadiness is your offering. This is how you bless the world, not by changing it, but by seeing it rightly. You walk among others, not as one who preaches, but as one who carries presence, and your presence does what your words no longer need to do. It reminds, it restores, it whispers through the silence. You are the one you've been waiting for, and if you can hold this soft knowing, long enough to forget the lack ever existed, then you will see how quickly the world forgets it too, not as a reward, not as a prize, but as a mirror, as the faithful servant of your assumption, forever waiting to be told who you are. Let the morning come now, not as a sunrise, but as a state. Let the promise break over you in silence. Let the thing you once pursued fall gently into your open hands, and when it does, you will not be surprised. You will simply say, of course, this is who I am. But what if even the manifestation itself is not the final gift, but the echo of your return, the living proof that you have finally remembered the eternal truth you once chose to forget? Because if the manifestation is only the echo, then the real miracle must be the return, not the return of the thing, but the return of the self, the sacred self, the one who never doubted, never begged, never feared delay, the self who lived always from the end, because it was the end. And perhaps you feel it now, the quiet settling, the calm reordering, like something ancient in you is no longer searching, no longer straining, only resting in its rightful place. That is the true receiving, not when the form arrives, but when the need disappears, when the wanting dissolves into presence, when the heart no longer reaches but recognizes. You said it once, and the world shifted, not because the word was magic, but because it was true. It matched the vibration of who you are beneath the veil. And now, everything that is not that truth falls away, not in violence, but in grace. What does not belong to the new self cannot follow it. You are not losing anything. You are shedding what was never yours. You are not waiting for the outcome. You are watching the reflection catch up. And in this space between assumption and appearance, the soul is stretched, not to be tested, but to be expanded. Because this is what living in the end truly means, that you no longer argue with appearances. You no longer give them authority. You no longer ask them for validation. You know that the only question worth asking is, who am I now? And when you answer that question from the end, the world bends accordingly. And so when the desire returns to you in form, gentle, quiet, inevitable, you do not gasp in surprise. You do not rejoice as one receiving something new. You smile as one remembering. Of course it came. Of course it looks this way. Of course it fits like breath, like light, like love. It had no choice but to come, because you had no choice but to become. Ye shall know them by their fruits, not by their striving, not by their waiting, but by the harvest that springs from their state. And your state has been faithful, even when the senses whispered otherwise. Even when the night grew long, you remained, and in your remaining, the fruit appeared. But you see now, the fruit was never the goal. The goal was the rootedness, the becoming, the deep inner shift into identity, permanent, quiet, unshakable. And from that shift the outer only echoed what had already become inevitable. So now you walk with new eyes, eyes that no longer seek, but see, eyes that rest upon the world without judgment. You do not need the evidence to convince you anymore. You are the evidence. You are the walking sign, and your life is the sermon, preached not in words but in stillness. This is the mystery that so few trust long enough to witness, that the Lord does not fail, that the word once spoken in alignment continues, even when you forget it, that the fulfillment is not born of repetition, but of rest, not born of ritual, but of identity. You said it once, and in that once, the whole world began to rearrange. And what if everything you ever wanted was always meant to be yours, not because you earned it, but because you were designed to remember it? What if your deepest desires were never about getting, but about reuniting with the self that had already received? Because reunion, not acquisition, is the heart of all true desire. What calls to you from the world is not something new. It is something ancient, a memory, wrapped in form, a whisper from the self who already is, already has, already knows. And when you answer that call not with striving, but with surrender, you awaken what was never lost. You feel it, even now, a soft unveiling, the fading of the old voice that used to ask, when will it happen, replaced by a deeper, quieter rhythm, I already am, and that rhythm once claimed does not fluctuate with conditions. It beats beneath the silence. It remains when the noise fades. To say it once and expect it in the morning is not the practice of those who dabble. It is the way of those who know, the ones who have turned from the outer world and planted their flag in the unseen, the ones who build not with hands, but with states, who see not with eyes, but with assumption. And so, if the desire lingers in your atmosphere, if its form has not yet arrived, you do not panic, you do not plead, you do not shift back into waiting. You remain, not stubbornly, but sweetly. You remain as the one who heard the inner word and allowed it to become flesh in the quiet chambers of imagination. This is where so many falter, not in the speaking, but in the staying, not in the desire, but in the dwelling. They say the words but then return to the old self who questions them. But the truth of the law is this: you can only receive what you have become asterisk. You cannot live in lack and attract abundance. You cannot wear the state of longing and expect the reflection of fulfillment. But when you put on the garment of the end, truly, fully, naturally, the world must mirror it. It must. For consciousness is not a passive witness to reality. It is the author, the painter, the breath that animates the canvas of experience. And once you have chosen your identity, the scene cannot remain unchanged. So you say it once, not out of fear that the law needs convincing, but because you need no convincing. You say it once, and the feeling carries you. You say it once, and the decision is made. You are no longer wondering, you are being. And this being is the doorway to all that appears. Before they call, I will answer. And while they are yet speaking, I will hear. The law responds not to words, but to frequency. Not to prayers repeated, but to states embodied. And your state, once set in motion, draws unto itself all things that match its tone. You are not here to collect outcomes. You are here to abide in the inner knowing that the outcomes are inevitable, that what belongs to you cannot miss you, not if you stay as the one who already has, the one who does not chase, but chooses, the one who does not plead, but presides. And now, you begin to live in this subtle royalty. You rise in the morning not asking what the day will bring, but deciding how you will feel. You move through time, not as a question, but as a declaration, and everything you touch begins to respond. Not because you spoke again, but because you never wavered from who you became. This is the gift of the once, the sacred economy of true faith. One word, born from identity, is worth more than 1,000 uttered from uncertainty. And that word still lives in you, creating, weaving, calling forth what already was in spirit. So breathe into that now. Let yourself be held by the power you no longer try to wield, but simply rest within. There is nothing to get. There is only more to remember. And what if remembering is the whole journey, not remembering what you want, but remembering who you are, and watching the world remember with you? Because when the world begins to remember with you, it does not shout in sudden transformation. It hums. It hums with the frequency you've been holding, quietly, faithfully. Even when nothing yet appeared to echo it, it answers not with thunder, but with ease. It brings you the reflection, not as a favor, but as a fact, the fact of who you now are. And you notice it first not in the grand events, but in the subtle, in how people speak to you, in how space feels around you, in how your body responds to the moment. Something has changed, not because the world shifted, but because you did. And the world, being your mirror, had no choice but to follow. You do not need to declare again. You do not need to add more to what is already complete. You live now in the stillness after the word, the divine hush that follows the decree. Like the sea after the voice has calmed the storm, like the land resting after the rain. You are not in suspense, you are in fulfillment. And what you fulfill is not just the form of the desire, you fulfill the prophecy of your own becoming. You embody the promise whispered to you in the sacred silence, the promise that you were never lacking, only dreaming of lack, that you were never waiting, only asleep to the present. You begin to realize that the delay was only ever your preparation, that the silence was not a gap, but a grace, that what you once called waiting was really gestation, the time it takes for the invisible to shape itself into the language of your world, and that time is never wasted when it is spent in faith. To remain faithful is to remember when others forget, to see what is not yet seen, to walk as the one who has, even when every sense insists otherwise. But the senses are not your guides, they are your echoes. They come after, never before. They follow your state, not the other way around. So you bless the silence now. You bless the days that feel still, because you know they are not empty. They are full of unfolding. The moment you assumed the end was planted, the moment you said it, the future bowed to your being. And now all that remains is trust, not passive, but potent, not waiting, but welcoming. And you welcome not as a servant watching the door, but as the heir whose name is already written on the deed. You are not hoping to inherit. You are walking in possession. You are not outside the kingdom, knocking. You are within, lighting candles. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. And the kingdom is not elsewhere. It is within. It is the feeling place of the fulfilled, the dwelling place of the end assumed, the garden that grows not by toil, but by alignment. You need not toil for what already knows your name. You need not chase what is trying to find you. You only need to remain as the one who no longer asks if it will come, because you know it already has. And in this knowing, something ancient softens. The old questions fall away. The grasping loosens. You become still, not as surrender to circumstances, but as return to self. And in that return the world begins to remember too. Let this stillness be your song now. Let it sing through your days and your nights. Let it weave through your breath, through your being. And as it does, watch how gently the unseen becomes seen, not with a crash, but with a whisper. But what if that whisper has always been there, not waiting for your words, but for your willingness to become the very thing you once sought to receive? What if the moment you chose identity, the entire universe whispered back? Because when the universe whispers yes, it does not speak in words. It responds in winds, in warmth, in windows that open where once there were only walls. The whisper comes as an unfolding soft as breath and certain as sunrise, not to confirm what you desire, but to reflect what you have dared to become, and you feel it. Not in the noise of life, but in the space between, the quiet glance, the effortless answer, the timing that feels too perfect to explain. But you do not rush to explain. You know better now. You no longer need to prove what your spirit already holds. You rest in the sacred rhythm of the yes you once declared. You said it once. You believed it once, not with desperation, but with finality. And that belief, rooted in identity, carried the seed of all things. It planted your new world not outside of you, but within you. And everything you meet now is the blooming of that inner soil. There is a deep magic in not repeating the desire, in not retelling the story, in not reopening the prayer, because each repetition, if born of fear, can water the weeds of doubt. But when you say it once and then dwell as the one who has, that is a prayer beyond language. That is communion. That is command. You walk differently now, not with urgency, but with assurance. You are not trying to convince reality. You are showing it who you are, and reality, faithful as it always is, conforms, slowly, subtly, then all at once. You don't command the world to change. You live changed, and that is what makes all the difference. This is why the law of assumption is not a method. It is a return to the creative center, where all outcomes are born from the I am. And once you claim the I am in fullness, nothing can contradict it. For contradiction would require you to step outside of being, and you no longer do that. You stay, you remain, you breathe in the fulfilled state, like it's your native air. You are not performing faith, you are being it. You are not acting as if, you are acting from. And there is a chasm of difference between those two. One is hope dressed in mimicry. The other is truth clothed in embodiment. The latter does not ask, it reveals. And when you reveal who you have become, the world can only follow. It does not ask why. It does not argue. It does not delay from judgment. It reflects purely, exactly, like water receiving the shape of whatever is placed within it. Your state is the mold, the mirror, the script. Thou shalt also decree a thing, and it shall be established unto thee. Not because the decree has volume, but because it has origin. It was spoken not from the outer man, but from the inner throne, and what is spoken from the throne carries the full authority of heaven and earth. So let yourself dwell now in the fruit of that decree. Even if your senses still show winter, you feel spring rising in your chest. Even if no one else believes, you no longer need their belief. You are not seeking evidence. You are resting in essence, and in time, essence becomes expression. You begin to bless the quiet now. You stop reaching for signs, and become the sign. You stop waiting for breakthroughs, and become the open door. You stop asking for the light, and realize you are the morning. And what if this quiet power, this sacred indifference to appearances, is not the end of the journey, but the true beginning? What if your embodiment has opened a space where the divine can finally move freely through you? What if this stillness is the place where all things are added, without effort, without striving, without delay? Because if this stillness is the space where all things are added, then the stillness is no longer the pause between blessings, it is the blessing itself. It is the sacred container where the formless becomes form, where the invisible takes shape in silence, where heaven meets earth not through sound, but through surrender. You are not in between, you are in the midst. And when you live from this holy hush, you notice the subtle shift in how you walk through the world. You don't need to reach anymore. You don't need to measure progress or perform faith. You simply allow. You allow life to unfold around you, as gently as a breath taken in trust. You do not command the rose to bloom. You stand in the fragrance of its unfolding. You said it once, and in that saying, you released the seed. You clothed it in being, and that being became your atmosphere. You breathe it in and out. You wear it in silence. You bring it into every room, not to change the space, but because you asterisk the change. You are the answered prayer, dressed in the ordinary. You are the sign someone else has been waiting for, and the world begins to respond to you in kind, not through fireworks, but through rhythm, not with trumpets, but with synchronicities that feel like grace disguised as coincidence. You are no longer waiting for your manifestation. You are living from it, and in that living, the form takes care of itself. This is why you no longer rush the process. You no longer pace in the hallway of waiting. You are seated at the table already. You eat as one who is full. You give as one who has. You walk as one who has. You walk as one who has already seen the harvest, even while others say the fields are still bare. Because you know the truth is never in the appearance. The truth is in the state, and your state is no longer built on hope, but on identity. You no longer wish for the future. You remember it. You do not look forward. You look inward, and there in that inner place, you find the end resting quietly, already complete. According to your faith, be it unto you, not according to your desire, not according to your struggle, according to your faith. And faith is not volume or emotion. It is the unwavering, invisible decision to remain as the one who already knows. You speak once, and then you live as though it is done, and that living is the echo that calls it forth. You begin to see now that everything you once feared, the delay, the silence, the doubt, was only the final test of whether you would stay, whether you would hold your place at the table, even when the chair felt empty, whether you would speak from fulfillment, even while the senses shouted lack. But you stayed, and that staying becomes the soil where miracles grow. You do not need to try anymore. You need only be, and being, when it is true, speaks louder than all affirmations combined. It doesn't strive, it sings. It doesn't perform, it radiates. And what you radiate, you receive, not because you chased it, but because it matched your frequency. And now you live inside that frequency, not because it is the latest technique, but because it is your nature. You do not return to the old questions. You do not rehearse the old stories. You rest in the present, where the end has already happened, and you are its witness in time. Let this presence hold you now. Let it soften the last pieces of striving still clinging to the edges of your heart. Let it remind you that the morning was never a destination. It was always an awakening, and you are already inside it. But what if this very stillness, this quiet embodiment, is what turns the key to a door you stopped knocking on? Because deep down, you finally remembered you were always inside the house. Because once you realize you are always inside the house, the knocking ceases. The longing dissolves. You no longer seek entrance. You look around and remember the furniture, the scent of the air, the weight of the silence that only comes when you are home. And with this remembrance comes peace. Not the peace of arrival, but the peace of identity, reclaimed. You no longer beg for the door to open. You no longer ask for signs. You no longer wait at the edge of your promise as though it belongs to another. Instead, you walk through the rooms with reverence. You move as one who belongs, because you do, not by merit, but by memory, not by striving, but by state. This is what happens when you say it once and rest in the stillness that follows. You begin to see not only the desire, but the self who was always worthy of it. The self who never needed to perform. The self who did not wait to be chosen, because they had already chosen. This is the deepest shift, from desiring the thing to identifying as the one who cannot be without it. You wear that identity now. You carry it not as effort, but as ease. And the more natural it becomes, the more the world reflects it without resistance. You do not need to correct your thoughts or monitor your vibration. You do not need to force your feelings. You simply stay in the knowing. You stay in the house, and staying becomes your offering. You become the still point in a world that rushes, the calm breath in a room of questions. People feel something different in your presence, not because you speak of manifestation, but because you are no longer manifesting, you are living. And this living is not loud, it is not grand, it is gentle, like the unfolding of petals, like the steady drip of morning light through open blinds. You are not waiting for change, you are watching it respond. The old you no longer needs to fix the mirror. The new you simply polishes the gaze, and in that gaze, everything softens. The delays begin to dissolve, not because you fought them, but because you stopped feeding them. You stopped identifying with the one who waits, and when the waiting ends, time bends. What once felt distant begins to draw near. What once felt locked begins to open with grace. Be still and know that I am God. Stillness is not absence, it is remembrance, and the knowing is not knowledge, it is being. You do not become God through study. You reveal God through stillness, through assumption, through dwelling in the end, as if it is the beginning, because in truth they are one, and you feel it now, this deep pulse of return, the echo of your original self rising, the sense that nothing needs to be added, only accepted. You do not need to hold tighter, you need only to let go more fully into what already is. The dream is not ahead, it is here, waiting for you to see with eyes that no longer seek, but recognize. So let recognition be your practice. Let familiarity guide your steps. Let ease replace effort, and watch how quickly the world reforms itself around your silence. You do not need to explain the change. You need only embody it, and embodiment, once true, cannot be faked, and cannot be ignored. And what if the form you're still waiting to see is already circling you, invisible only to the eyes that still expect it to be far? What if your only work now is to stand still long enough for it to land, and recognize its home in you? Because what you called waiting may have only been movement too fine to see, not a delay but a descent. Form coming closer, nearer, quieter, close enough to feel, even before it's visible. And in that closeness, in that sacred hush before manifestation breathes its first breath, your only task is to remain. To remain is to welcome, to let your state be so constant, so familiar, that the thing you once longed for recognizes its resting place in you, not as something newly acquired, but as something long remembered, a home it has finally returned to, and you, the one who said it once, and let it be, become the fulfillment made flesh. You do not reach out to meet it, you dwell as if it has already arrived, because in spirit it has. You feel its weight in your atmosphere, its tone in your thoughts, its rhythm in your steps. It is no longer a question, it is a presence, and in this presence, you are calm. The outside may still echo old patterns, shadows of what once was, but you no longer react, you no longer ask why. You do not measure truth by appearances, you walk in faith, not because you must, but because you can. You've tasted the stillness of being, and found it sweeter than striving, stronger than signs, and the outer world cannot help but notice. Circumstances bend without explanation, people change without effort, paths open where none existed, but you do not rejoice as one surprised. You nod in quiet agreement. Of course this is the shape it took, of course this is the way it arrived. It is only reflecting who you became in silence. This is the miracle hidden in every manifestation, not that it came, but that you no longer needed it. Not because you gave up, but because you gave in. You stopped standing at the edge of the promise, and stepped into the center. You stopped waiting for proof, and became it. Let it be done unto thee according to thy word. Not because the word was loud, not because it was repeated, but because it was rooted. It came from the deep, it came from the end. And when the word comes from the end, it carries within it the whole beginning, not just as potential, but as path. You no longer ask how long it will take. Time is no longer your keeper. You have become timeless in your assumption. You are the still point around which all movement organizes. You are the calm at the center of your own unfolding. The world turns, but your being is set. And in that being there is no more effort, no more doubt disguised as action. You do not revisit the desire. You do not revisit the desire. You do not recite the prayer. You live the result. You breathe the answered question. You walk not toward the morning, but with it. And the morning, seeing that you no longer chase it, turns its face to you, not with noise, not with spectacle, but with familiarity. The way a friend returns to a table you never left. The way light slips across a room, already prepared for it. Let that light enter now. Let it fill the space where doubt once dwelled. Let it warm the corners of your being, you once kept in reserve. There is nothing you need to do. There is only this: to be the one who said it once, and trusted it enough to stay. And what if staying, in that sacred state, in that inner yes, is the final gate through which the impossible becomes inevitable? What if the very act of not moving, not forcing, not questioning, is the moment your world takes its cue to unfold? Because perhaps the final movement is no movement at all, just the sacred stillness of one who no longer doubts their authority, of one who no longer asks permission from the world to believe what the Spirit has already declared true. You rest now, not because there is nothing to do, but because all has already been done, in consciousness, in assumption, in being. This stillness is not empty, it is charged. It is the silence of the artist after the final stroke, the hush before the applause, the breath between dream and waking. It carries more power than 10,000 words spoken in uncertainty, because it is not trying to become. It has already become, and in that becoming, the world finds its cue. It shifts in your favor, without noise or resistance, like clouds parting after a long night. What once seemed far now draws near, not with fanfare, but with familiarity, because the state you dwell in has already made room for it. It was never about drawing it in. It was about drawing yourself into alignment with what already was. So when you said it once, and meant it, you planted more than a thought. You planted an identity, and identities do not need constant affirmation. They only need habitation. You don't remind the sun to rise, nor the tide to return. You simply live in harmony with their rhythm, and now you live in harmony with your own decree. This is the secret so often missed, that the power is not in the saying, but in the staying. Not in the declaration, but in the dwelling. And when you dwell in the state of fulfillment, the world bends around that fulfillment, faithfully and without fail. You do not need to trace the path. The path forms beneath your feet. You do not need to open the doors. They begin to open of themselves, not because you forced them, but because your inner stillness, your silent certainty, has become irresistible. You carry this knowing now. It's in your breath, your tone, the way you move. You are no longer trying to convince the world. You're not even waiting for it to agree. You are simply revealing it, moment by moment, as it unfolds around the shape of your assumption. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. The substance is in you. The evidence is your peace. You no longer wait for the thing to appear in order to believe. You believe, and so it appears, not as a prize, but as a match, the outer reflecting the inner, as it always does. And as this inner space becomes your temple, your sanctuary, your home, the need to leave it vanishes. You stop visiting your assumptions like guests. You become one with them. You stop checking in on your desires. You stop feeding them with worry or repetition. You trust what you've planted, and because you trust, you rest. The resting is not idleness. It is spiritual power. It is magnetic. It is fertile. It draws what is yours with quiet certainty. And it speaks, not to others, but to the law. And the law always answers, not to your struggle, not to your volume, but to your assumption. So breathe now into that assumption. Let it cradle you. Let it replace every effort with ease, every question with knowing. Feel yourself already inside the life you once imagined, not hoping for it, not asking again, but being it, as naturally as breath, as steadily as light, And what if the very things you thought you had to work for are already on their way, simply because you stopped leaving the state to search for them? What if they were waiting not for your striving, but for your stillness, for the moment you finally knew you were already enough to receive? Because enough was never something you had to become. It was something you had to remember. And the moment you stopped reaching, stopped bargaining, stopped striving to prove your worth to a world that can only reflect what you accept, that was the moment you opened the door. Not a door in time or space or situation, but a door in self. And what flowed through was not just your desire, but your divine inheritance, the end that had been waiting for you to claim it, not with pleading lips, but with the quiet posture of one who knows *, I already am. * You said it once, and you said it with knowing. And from that moment on, everything else became background. The noise of circumstance, the static of delay, all of it became irrelevant in the presence of your unwavering state, because the state was now who you are, not what you try to feel. And that is what the world responds to. Not your longing, but your being. Not your questions, but your decisions. For the world is not moved by how badly you want it, but by how fully you have become it. And becoming is not an act, it is a rest, a sacred allowing of what has always been true to take shape through you. So now you live differently. You don't react to delays. You don't chase confirmation. You walk as one who no longer needs evidence to feel aligned. You *are the evidence. You are the living proof that fulfillment does not come after appearances change, but before, because it is your change of identity that bends the world, not the other way around. You no longer obsess over the outer picture. You tend to the inner tone. You keep the garden of your imagination fertile with faith, not with effort. And because you do, life begins to mirror you in ways both beautiful and bewildering. But you are no longer surprised. You are familiar with the rhythm of miracles now. You have made their language your own. And when they come, not if, but when, you will not celebrate as one who finally received. You will smile as one who never truly lacked. Because the moment you stopped searching outside yourself, you rediscovered the source, the I am, the center, the spring that does not run dry. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee, not because the world is peaceful, but because your focus is no longer fragmented. It is settled. And from that inner stillness, all outward chaos dissolves or rearranges, not by your doing, but by your dwelling. You dwell now, not as effort, but as essence. And that essence sends ripples through time, through space, through what others call chance. But you know it is not chance, it is law. And the law cannot fail to return to you what you have faithfully embodied. So you no longer wonder how long it will take. You no longer ask what you must do. You already did the one thing required. You said it, and you believed it. And now you let it rise in you like dawn, slowly, certainly, in perfect peace. Let this peace become your resting place. Let it be the air you breathe, the ground you walk, the silence you trust more than words. You do not need to say it again. You do not need to stir the waters. You are still, and in your stillness it is done. But what if the very act of letting go of the need to receive is what prepares you to receive more than you ever imagined? What if the one who no longer waits, simply welcomes *? Because welcoming is not something you do with your hands, it's something you do with your state. You open the inner door, not by will, but by warmth. You create the space in which the form may enter, not by asking it to come again, but by acting as if it never left. You make yourself a match not by pursuit, but by presence. The one who welcomes is not watching the horizon with fear. The one who welcomes sets the table, lights the candle, fills the cup, and does so, not with questions, but with quiet confidence, because they know the guest is already on the way, drawn not by invitation, but by resonance. The resonance of readiness, of assumption held long enough that it becomes identity. And you have become that identity now. You are no longer circling around your desire, waiting for permission to believe. You are the fulfillment, embodied. You are not trying to have, you are letting having be your natural state. And in this letting, everything opens. You said it once, and trusted that once to be enough, because it wasn't the repetition that moved the law. It was the feeling behind the word, the assumption beneath the sound, that deep inner yes that didn't need to be loud, only sure. And once it was spoken from the end, the world began to shape around it, like dust drawn into form by invisible light. You no longer question if it's coming. You ask instead, how does it feel to already be? How does it feel to sit where the prayer has already landed? How does it feel to no longer be a seeker, but a vessel? This is what makes all the difference, not in the world, but in you. Because the outer world was never the source. It was the stage, the canvas, the echo chamber. The source is always within, and within you have already received. Ask, and it shall be given you. Not as transaction, not as test, but as revelation. For the moment you truly ask, not from fear, but from faith, you are really receiving. To ask in consciousness is to become, and becoming is the only asking the law understands. So you no longer plead, you prepare, you do not wait, you welcome. You live inside the end until the end becomes the only thing that feels real. Not because it has been proven, but because it has been worn. And once the state is worn long enough, it imprints itself upon the fabric of your world. You begin to move in new ways, with less tension, with more softness, with the kind of grace that comes from having nothing to prove and nothing to force. And this grace magnetizes everything. It tells the world, I am ready, without saying a word, and the world listens. Because the world always listens to your being. You are not forgotten, you are not outside, you are not separate from your desire. You are it, made visible in time. You no longer talk about what is coming, you dwell in what is here. And what is here is the quiet certainty that the word did not return void. It never does. Let that truth settle now. Let it rise in your breath and anchor in your spine. You do not need to check the sky. You do not need to search for signs. The signs follow those who believe. They are not chased. They are not commanded. They unfold like petals, in perfect order, around the one who stays in state. And what if this staying, this calm holding, is not the end of the process, but the birth of a new kind of life? One where you don't just manifest things, but live as one who no longer doubts the divine within, and lets the world confirm that faith, without effort, without noise, and without delay. Because a life lived without doubt in the divine within is not a louder life, but a lighter one. It doesn't insist, it doesn't chase, it doesn't measure reality through the narrow lens of what is seen. It rests in the unseen. And from that resting, shapes everything. You are no longer creating in the way the world defines it. You are remembering, you are selecting, you are assuming the already finished, and letting it unfold on the stage of time. You are not trying to be the one who has, you are letting that version of yourself take the lead, and she, or he, or they, the fulfilled one, does not struggle. The fulfilled one does not circle the desire with analysis or questions. The fulfilled one walks through the world as if the ink has already dried on the page, as if the answer has already been sent, and the only thing left is to receive it with calm joy. So you receive, and in receiving, you soften. You release the tension that used to hold your jaw, the thoughts that used to race your breath. You are not preparing for it to come. You are living inside the quiet knowledge that it already is asterisk. And from that knowing, everything flows. You've tasted what it feels like to dwell in the end. And now that you've tasted it, everything else feels like noise. You no longer entertain the old states for long. You don't argue with them. You don't resist them. You just don't feed them. Because they don't belong to you anymore. Not because they're wrong, but because they no longer match who you've become. This is the natural ease of true identity. You don't cling to the truth. You don't rehearse the truth. You relax into it. You let it hold you. And the moment it becomes effortless is the moment it becomes inevitable. Thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory. These are not distant things. They are states. They are yours. The kingdom is the inner world you rule. The power is your assumption, held long enough to replace every doubt. And the glory, the visible outpicturing, is the world bowing gently to your decision. You don't need to force the glory. You don't need to explain the power. You don't even need to defend the kingdom. You just need to remain in the end, without needing the world to confirm it first. You confirm it from within. And once you do, the law takes over. You said it once, and that was enough. Because what you said you meant. What you meant, you felt. And what you felt you became. And that becoming became your magnet. It became the mold. And now everything that matches your mold must take shape around you. You do not mold the world through action. You mold it through being, through inner fidelity to your assumption. And that fidelity, once rooted, does not require shouting. It does not need to be reinforced by force. It flows, it attracts, it reveals. This is why you no longer pray with urgency. You pray with embodiment. You do not plead, you allow. You say it once, and you wait in trust, not because you are unsure, but because you are already full, and fullness waits with ease. Let that ease wrap around you now. Let it become your rest, your rhythm, your home. The effort is over, the proving is over, the need to fix, to chase, to monitor, all over. What remains is you already chosen, you already worthy, you already whole. And what if your greatest manifestation isn't even the form you once desired, but this version of you who can walk through life without grasping, because you finally believe that everything real is already yours. Because when you believe that everything real is already yours, something in you unwinds. You stop bracing against the future. You stop fighting with the present. You no longer grasp, because there is nothing outside to chase. You are no longer on the edge of arrival. You are seated in the center of fulfillment, and the air around you begins to change. This is the quiet power of the one who said it once, the one who knew they didn't need to repeat, rehearse, or reword, because the truth, once assumed, does not need defending. It defends itself. The moment you assume a state, you become the keeper of a world the senses have not yet seen, and if you hold it faithfully, that unseen must become seen. It begins not in events, but in atmosphere. You feel it first in the way your body relaxes, in the way your inner world stops striving and begins to soften. The mind slows and the heart steadies. You are no longer trying to believe. You are being belief itself. You are no longer seeking the sign. You are the sign. And this is the greatest relief, to know that nothing outside you holds the key, that no condition, no timing, no circumstance determines your end. The end is already alive in you. It was spoken the moment you felt it real. And that feeling, though it came in stillness, was a seed containing everything. Faith cometh by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. But the word is not always spoken aloud. Often it is felt, it is assumed, it is embodied in silence. And when the word lives in you, when your whole being begins to echo the tone of its truth, life rearranges itself in response. So you do not speak from lack anymore. You speak from knowing. You speak not to get something, but to stabilize what is already yours in spirit. And often the most powerful speech is silence, the silence of certainty, the quiet of a fulfilled soul. You dwell now in that quiet. You let it rise around you like a warm tide. You are no longer reacting. You are revealing what you chose long ago in the language of assumption. And you don't need to explain this to anyone, not even to yourself. You simply keep being the version of you that has already received. And when thoughts come to tempt you back into effort, when the old world knocks with its familiar voice, you do not resist. You simply remember. You remember who you are now. You remember that the outer always takes time to catch up, but the real shift already occurred the moment you said it, the moment you felt it, the moment you claimed it as done. You don't go back to hoping. You rest in knowing. You don't replant the seed. You water it with stillness. You don't ask the field for signs of life. You bless it and continue walking as one whose harvest is certain. And because your walk has changed, your world must follow. Feel what begins to rise in you again. Not urgency, not craving, but peace. A peace that does not come after things are added, but before, because it is the very substance from which they are drawn. That peace is your new soil. That peace is your new home. And what if this peace, this sacred stillness, is the very thing that not only brings what you once wanted, but begins to shape desires you never could have imagined before you became the one who no longer needed them to feel whole? What if the real miracle is who you've become by saying it once and living as though it had already come? Because the real miracle was never the object. It was never the house or the healing, the partner or the promise. The miracle was always this version of you, quiet, rested, whole, the one who no longer chases, because they finally remember they are the one from whom all things flow. And what flows now is not effort, but essence. You said it once, and in that moment something eternal clicked into place, not out there, but in you. And ever since, reality has been tracing the lines you drew in silence, not with hands, but with being. You've become the blueprint. You've become the foundation. You've become the answer that no longer needs to arrive, because it already abides. And this abiding is not passive. It's radiant. It's magnetic. You hold the state like flame holds its shape, without strain, without apology. You no longer check if it's working. You no longer test the ground for fruit. You rest in the knowing that your roots go deeper now, so deep in fact that nothing above needs to reassure you. The truth is in the soil, and the soil is yourself. And what is self if not the chosen identity assumed and kept without collapse? What is self if not the awareness that says asterisk I am this and never wavers, the one who said it once and became it, the one who wears the end like breath, the one who has stopped performing and started remembering. You remember now, not through analysis, but through atmosphere. You don't mentally convince yourself. You feel it. You feel it in the way you rise, in the way you speak, in the way you look at the world as if it already knows, and the world, like any faithful mirror, adjusts to match. It is no longer about trying to get. You are not calling in what is far. You are calling forth what is near, nearer than hands and feet, closer than breath. The form is only a shadow. The real thing is the state, and the state lives in you now. It walks with you. It whispers when old voices try to return. It stands with you when nothing seems to change, because the change already happened, not outside, but in the quiet place where you said it, and meant it, and never unsaid it. You didn't need to repeat it. You didn't need to rehearse it. You needed only to become the one who no longer questions what they have already chosen, and you have become that one. You live now as the one who is not waiting, but witnessing, watching the world unfold around a decision so deeply rooted, it can't help but bloom. Blessed is she that believed, for there shall be a performance of those things which were told her from the Lord. And that performance does not need to be chased. It doesn't need to be accelerated. It reveals itself on time, because you remained on path. You stayed in state. You stayed in peace. And peace is not weakness. It is power. The kind of power that no longer has to prove itself. The kind that opens doors without knocking, because the vibration itself is the key. You don't ask the lock to yield. You simply carry the energy of the one who already belongs on the other side. Let yourself feel that belonging now. Let it wrap around you like memory, like morning, like the hush before the curtain lifts. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not stuck. You are simply being. And in your being everything begins to move. And what if this version of you, the one you're living now, is not just a better version, but your original self, the one who never forgot how powerful a single assumption can be, when it is made in truth and kept in silence? What if everything else was just the journey back? Because the journey back was never toward something, but inward to someone, the you who never left the garden, the you who never doubted the word, the you who in some forgotten corner of the eternal now had already spoken, had already known, had already rested in the truth that creation is finished. And now you've returned, not by striving, but by surrender. Not by chasing the outer, but by becoming the inner. You said it once, and that one time was enough, because you said it from the end. You declared from identity, and identity, once assumed, does not ask again. This is the secret few ever trust long enough to see, that the miracle is not in saying it many times, but in believing it once, so fully, so deeply, so quietly, that the world cannot help but rearrange itself to match. You didn't make it happen. You made it welcome. You cleared the space by no longer contradicting your own decree, and in that clearing, the blessing unfolded, like morning light, like breath, like water running toward what is open. You were not the source of the miracle. You were the one who allowed it in. You held the door, not with effort, but with stillness. And the answer entered, because you no longer stood in the way. You understand now that fulfillment doesn't crash into your world with noise. It slips in with peace. You don't recognize it by shock. You recognize it by how natural it feels. The world reflects you as you truly are, not when you speak loudly, but when you align quietly. You've become the one who knows how to hold a state without strain, how to return to the end with every breath, how to feel the prayer answered, not with emotion, but with embodiment. And because you live from the end, you no longer resist the process. You no longer ask for signs, because your state is the sign. You no longer seek certainty, because your breath is your confirmation, and you no longer wait for arrival, because you are the arrival. And the world, with all its conditions and timelines, bows to the one who no longer needs it to change, in order to feel complete. Before they call, I will answer. This was never about timing. This was always about being. The call is not with lips, but with assumption. The answer is not in words, but in unfolding. And when you speak from the end, when you say it once, and let it live in your spine, the entire universe begins the sacred performance of becoming your reflection. And so you rest now, not because the work is done, but because it never had to be done. It only had to be known. It only had to be remembered. You rest in the knowing that what is yours is already yours, not just in potential, but in pattern, not just in idea, but in identity. Let this rest carry you. Let it be your breath and your rhythm. Let it hold you when the world asks you to doubt. Let it answer before you ask. You no longer need to search for techniques or signs. You no longer need to convince your mind. You've moved beyond logic. You've become the prayer itself. You said it once, and you believed it. And now, you walk not to create, but to reveal, not to arrive, but to awaken, not to manifest, but to mirror. And if you forget, even for a moment, if the old world comes whispering again, you will not panic, you will smile, you will return, you will remember, because this is the law. Consciousness is the only reality. What you assume in stillness, you meet in form. What you declare in faith, you encounter in time. What you say once, with the fullness of being, you will wake up to as morning, always. And what if this waking is not just the beginning of your manifestation, but the quiet end of every question you ever asked, answered not in words, but in who you have now become?